Most modern societies believe they have absorbed the lessons of the 20th century's great wars. We tell ourselves that industrial mobilization, civil defense, rationing systems, and strategic deterrence are settled knowledge, problems solved by history. Yet when you look closely at how populations actually endured prolonged conflict, a different picture emerges. The most important wartime lessons were not about battlefield maneuvers or grand strategy. They were about supply fragility, institutional overconfidence, civilian resilience, and the limits of centralized control. Those lessons were learned at extraordinary cost, and today many of them are quietly ignored. What follows is not a summary of campaigns or famous generals. It is an examination of the overlooked realities that shaped survival and collapse in the modern age of total war, and what they still reveal about preparedness in complex societies. In both world wars, industrial powers entered conflict, believing that production capacity alone guaranteed endurance. Germany in 1914 assumed rapid victory would precede material exhaustion. Britain trusted naval supremacy to shield it from serious deprivation. In 1941, the Soviet Union relocated entire factories eastward, proving industrial resilience could be engineered under duress. Yet in every case, the decisive factor was not abstract output, but supply chain continuity. The German Turnip Winter of 1916–17 was not caused by a lack of farmland. It was caused by fertilizer shortages, transportation breakdowns, and mismanaged requisition systems. Food existed, but distribution failed. The same pattern appeared in Japan during the final years of World War II. Strategic bombing targeted transportation networks more than factories. When rail lines and shipping lanes collapsed, food rotted in rural areas while urban populations starved. Industrial capacity is irrelevant when logistics disintegrate. Modern societies often assume that digital tracking systems and global trade agreements eliminate this vulnerability. History suggests otherwise. Complexity increases efficiency, but it also multiplies points of failure. Wartime experience shows that redundancy, not optimization, is what preserves stability under stress. Total war encouraged centralized economic control. Governments rationed food, fuel, clothing, and raw materials. In theory, centralization ensured fairness and efficiency. Britain's rationing system during World War II is often praised, and with reason. It prevented famine and maintained nutritional standards better than expected. But even there, the system depended heavily on local initiative, black markets that supplemented deficiencies, and an agricultural campaign that mobilized civilian labor. In the Soviet Union, central planning achieved astonishing feats of relocation and production. However, it also generated chronic shortages and distorted reporting. Factories met quotas on paper while producing unusable equipment. The lesson is not that centralized systems always fail. It is that no planning structure functions well without local competence, truthful reporting, and decentralized problem-solving. In crisis, rigid hierarchies break down faster than flexible networks. Interwar air power theorists argued that bombing cities would break civilian morale quickly and decisively. The expectation was that populations would panic, governments would collapse, and wars would end swiftly. This assumption shaped strategic doctrine on all sides. The reality was more complicated. During the Blitz, British civilian morale did not shatter, it hardened. Casualties were severe, housing stock was destroyed, and infrastructure suffered, yet social cohesion often increased. Civil defense networks, air raid wardens, volunteer fire brigades, decentralized shelters created a structure that gave civilians agency. Germany experienced a similar pattern during early bombing campaigns. Despite heavy destruction, morale proved resilient so long as basic services functioned and local authority remained visible. Where morale truly collapsed, it did so under conditions of compounded failure, hunger, displacement, institutional breakdown, and loss of credible leadership. Bombing alone rarely achieved the political results predicted by theorists. The 20th century is often framed as a story of technological escalation. Tanks replaced cavalry, aircraft transformed reconnaissance, nuclear weapons altered geopolitics. Yet in prolonged conflict, endurance depended less on advanced machinery and more on human adaptability. The German army entered the Soviet Union in 1941 with tactical superiority and operational innovation, but it lacked adequate winter preparation, underestimated logistical distances, and failed to anticipate industrial relocation. American forces in the Pacific faced similar environmental constraints. Jungle warfare negated certain technological advantages. Disease prevention, supply distribution across vast ocean distances, and small unit autonomy proved as decisive as weapon systems. Wartime scarcity did more than reduce consumption. It altered social norms. In Britain, rationing equalized diets across class lines. In the United States, scrap drives and victory gardens created a sense of participatory contribution. Equitable burden sharing is not merely a moral issue, it is a stability mechanism. Wartime governments that managed perception and fairness effectively maintained cohesion longer. Those that allowed visible inequality under strain accelerated internal dissent. The Marshall Plan is frequently cited as the decisive factor in European recovery after World War II. It was significant, but it succeeded largely because functioning institutions and social networks remained intact in many regions. Where administrative capacity survived, aid translated into growth. Where governance structures were hollowed out, recovery lagged. The nuclear age fostered the belief that mutually assured destruction prevented total war. In one sense, it did. Great power conflicts became constrained, yet vulnerability shifted from conventional invasion to infrastructure disruption, proxy conflict, and economic warfare. Many of these wartime lessons challenge contemporary assumptions. They suggest that efficiency without redundancy invites fragility. They reveal that morale depends on fairness and competence more than rhetoric. They demonstrate that centralized authority must coexist with local initiative. They remind us that technology does not abolish environmental and logistical constraints. These conclusions are uncomfortable because they require sustained investment in resilience that may never be visibly tested. Democracies in particular struggle with long-term preparation for low-probability but high-impact disruptions. Wartime governments had no such luxury. Failure was immediate and visible. The 20th century's conflicts were catastrophic, but they were also laboratories of adaptation. They exposed which systems bent without breaking and which collapsed under stress. The most enduring insights came not from victory parades but from ration books, factory relocations, improvised shelters, and repaired rail lines. Understanding those realities is not about romanticizing hardship. It is about recognizing patterns that recur whenever complex systems face sustained pressure. If you value serious historical analysis that looks beyond surface narratives and into the structural forces that shape survival, consider subscribing to the Prepper Historian and sharing this video. The past still has lessons to teach, if we are willing to examine them honestly.